You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hey, welcome to the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where we know that security at the expense of liberty is slavery. We got a great show for you tonight. We got a very special guest that I will introduce here shortly, but we want to welcome everybody that is tuning in now and everybody that's going to be tuning in the future. And a big shout out to our Lost Boys over on Rumble that get no love because this platform doesn't support their comments, but hopefully they'll fix that in the very near future. Summer, how was your week?
It's good so far.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Chris?
Hopefully the week gets better.
We're going super negative already?
No, I have some things I'm looking forward to.
You asked, you just being honest.
My Supra should be done at getting tuned and everything by the end of the week, first of next week, so I have a Supra back, and I may have accepted a new job somewhere.
What?
So, yeah.
At Paramount Tactical?
I mean, if you're paying what they're paying.
We'll talk about that. We'll try to get you hooked up. Now I want to welcome everybody. We got Loyal Castleton, Mike Henn, Ted Boyette, Kirk Colson, everybody else that's tuning in. Make sure you say hi when you come in so we can recognize you. We got a fun show for you tonight, but before we get into that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit that like button. Also, if you're not already, follow us on Substack. There's a link down in the description. Go hit that newsletter. We don't spam it. We don't share or sell your information. We try to keep that newsletter as relevant as possible. Chad Wyckoff, good seeing you, buddy. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest. I want to welcome to you guys. I want you guys to welcome Caleb White from Caleb White Knives. He is a custom knife maker. And Caleb, if you will, just take a moment, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and go from there, man.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's pretty awesome. New to the podcast world. I've been making knives for about 15 years now. I started when I got out of the Air Force in 2008. I went full-time as a maker about 7 years ago. Just making custom one-at-a-time combat knives, tactical knives, fixed blades. I do some frame locks and stuff like that too. Mostly stock removal, working with high-end alloys and stuff like that. Anything that you can use and can be useful. You know what I mean? That's
absolutely. And what kind of got you into knife making?
Kind of started as a fascination as a kid. I'll be honest. It started very young. I was I grew up in cowboy culture, West Texas. Everybody had a knife. I grew up on the Rambo, Crocodile Dundee shows and stuff like that. And it was just something that always fascinated me, armor and swords and stuff like that. So I actually had a great grandfather who was an old veteran who took me in a shop when I was a young kid, and he introduced me to just craftsmanship and working with your hands and stuff. And he had a couple tools and knives that he'd made. And so that really kind of sparked my imagination as a kid. And knowing people who were in the knife making craft is kind of hard, in a lot of circles. Most people don't know somebody who's a knife maker. So I didn't actually meet anybody who was a knife maker until I grew up and went in the Air Force, theoretically grew up. And one of my supervisors, Master Sergeant, he was a knife maker. And so he introduced me to the actual craft, and now he's my best friend. He runs with me to all the knife shows and stuff, and he's been my longest mentor, and he introduced me to the craft. And then when I got out in 2008, I built my first shop and started just ruining steel and tearing stuff apart. And it ruined me. That was it. I was like, this is what I'm going to do with my life eventually,
right.
Whatever it takes, this is what we're going to do, And so my wife's been very patient.
That's a big part.
Nathan's been around longer than she has, so she came along. We got married the next year, and I spent quite a few years working odd jobs, going to college, trying to find my way after the military, just trying to find some direction and find some stability, and having kids and all that good stuff. The whole time I'm down in the basement just grinding it out every night or every chance I got. I worked as a professor for a little while, worked at gun stores, did the normal thing. Just tried to find a way, but I was always grinding away at the knives and just knew that one day I was going to do something with it, try to make it a full-time thing. So she took the risk with me in 2016, and I went full-time, and it's been awesome ever since.
Yeah, you gotta have the family on board with that. And for folks that don't know, making a living in the custom knife world is a challenge to say the least. And hopefully you're doing really well. The Blade Show helps, any exposure you guys get. And Caleb, I've been following you for many years. I don't know when I started following you, but I came across your knives. And for those that don't know, I also, made some custom knives back in the day. I did that for a while. I thought that was the path that I was going to go. And I think eventually, I don't know if I'll get into custom knives, but definitely like mid-tech, high-end production knives is something that I'll get into in the future. But, it's tough, man. The amount of time that you end up putting to those. I think one time we did a cost analysis of what I was making an hour. And I got to the point where I was selling knives for $700-800, a piece, and that was a lot of money. Even this is back in like 2009, 10, 11, 12, around that time period. And I think after we worked it out, I was making about $4 or $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Solid money.
Yeah, solid money. Solid money. But
it was all completely, like, every bit of it was custom handmade by you.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a lot of time.
It was a lot of time, and I'm very OCD, and I probably spent 30% more time on every knife than, and I'm sure you went through that.
I have
But
the same problem still.
yeah, it's like, you see that one little thing, and then fix that one little thing, you mess something else up, and now you got to put an edge back. It is a craft for the insane. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, if you want to be a millionaire making knives, you better start out a billionaire. You know what I mean? It's not always been easy. It was since we went full time. I'm gonna be honest. My wife has a good job, and she's had it for a long time, and it's stable. It's provided us the stability we needed. But even outside of knife making, I was having a hard time finding work when I got out. Went and got degrees and everything, and it's still the job market for my skill set and stuff. Even as I'm a graphic designer from college, that's what I did.
Oh wow, okay.
And so I did graphic design, I did media arts, illustration, that kind of thing. I love it. I grew up drawing and illustrating as well. And all of that has played direct role in my knives and knife design.
Yeah, I bet.
Really
No,
helped
I mean, when I saw some of the blueprints that you made for your knives, it reminded me of Bill Harsey.
Yeah.
Very detailed, and those themselves are works of art that you have there. And if you guys haven't, again, down in the description below, there's links to his different social media, his website. Definitely go check out his knives. Go check out some of the cool artwork. Go check out his Instagram. He's doing freaking awesome stuff. And one thing that I really like about your knives is the fact that there's a real blend between modern utilitarian knives and also there's a real traditional flair that I personally like. I don't like some of these old-timey knives. That's not my thing. But the way that you execute a very modern design with some very traditional touches, I think it's freaking phenomenal. So you're doing awesome stuff out there.
I've always tried to find a marriage between the two, because I grew up inspired and just loving that old Bowie knife ethos and mystique, and all of that. But I grew up, 10 years in the military also, skewed my preference in a lot of ways for combat field and utilitarian knives as well. And I mean, trying to find a way to marry artistic expression with utility has always been my goal. I've always wanted to find like what is it that it's, like you say, it kind of reaches back for the old school, but it's done in a newer way and has a little more style to it, and I mean, if I had to pick any one genre to actually say that's my inspiration, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that means it's your own stuff, and that's, I think, what it's all about. I think one of the things that I was telling you before we went live here, one of the things that I want to do for you viewers out there, again, I'm a huge knife nut. I got a ton of knives. I always have knives on me. What I'd like to do is kind of use or allow Caleb to kind of give everybody a kind of a master class on what makes a good knife. We'll kind of go through the process, talking about selecting the different steels. We were talking a little bit before about, forging versus stock removal, what the benefits of some of the modern steels are. And, we'll kind of delve into that. And then, folks, if you have comments we'll take questions and definitely go through the comments toward the end. But definitely post them as we go, and I'll click on them, and then we'll cover them at the end. But so, going back to just overall knife design, every time that I used to tell people that, hey, I made knives. They're like, oh, well, you forge. Tell everybody a little bit about the pros and cons of forging versus stock removal and kind of what the differences are there.
Okay, yeah, no, I get that question a lot. I mean, every knife show, there's always somebody or multiple somebodies who come in. Oh, so you forge your knives? I'm like, no, I don't. I do stock removal, and you have to explain to them like forging is an old school process. It has romanticism attached to it. Um, a lot of ways it was necessity. It's just heat and beat it. Get your metal hot, move it in the shape you want it, and make the most out of maybe lesser quality steels mixing with higher quality steels and kind of maximizing the useful blade you can get out of those steels. And that's the old school way of doing things because that's the way it had to be done for the longest time. um, Oddly enough, stock removal actually predates modern forging as we know it by a few centuries, by a few millennia even, because if you think back to the Bronze Era and stuff like that, they were casting and then grinding most everything. Even the Egyptians and stuff.
Or even napping flints and
Yeah, nap and flint. I mean,
yeah.
you think about like stock removal is, in a lot of ways, stock removal is the foundation of knife making, blade making, and tool making.
And you're almost always doing some sort of stock removal, even if you forge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are super talented with the forge and hammer, and they can get really close to shape, but everybody always ends up on the grinder, no matter what. And the old, you go back centuries and centuries, it was basically mostly stock removal. You can cast to shape or find, flint, and then you have to remove what you don't need. And it's basically reducing your material down to a useful tool. And so the forging thing is very useful in Damascus, stuff like that. When you want to make pattern welded steels, it's a crucial process for that. It's a really high grade way to get the most out of low grade steels. If I want to put it any certain kind of way, like thinking about the Japanese bladesmiths back in the day, 15th, 16th century, when they started mixing tamahagane and stuff like that, doing, they have very limited quantities of high grade steel and very big quantities of low grade steel.
Right.
So you have to find a way to marry the two and shape and maximize and minimize waste and overall all that kind of stuff. So forging is a great process. I would highly recommend any knife maker out there at least try it, at least give it a go. I know guys who love it. That's all they want to do is forge. It's a cathartic process for them, and it's part of their artistic expression in their craft, and that's a beautiful thing. And if that's your game and that's your genre, go for it, like all in. It's just today we live in a world where we're blessed with massive amounts of really high grade steel, like the CPM series, like CPM 154. That's one of my foundation steels in the shop, and it's based off of the old 150s 4CM and then the Japanese version ATS 34. CPM is a particle metal version, so it's cleaner, finer grain structure. It's just an overall cleaner steel.
And explain that a little bit to folks.
Yep.
The old way that we used to get even blanks or sheets of steel versus again these particle metallurgy that they're doing now, which is actually super interesting, and it's the reason that we're getting such better performance out of steel today. Not only can they take traditional formulas of steel and make it a lot better, but now they're adding just a little bit of this here, a little bit of this there, and they're making these extremely high performance steels using this particle metallurgy. And if you will, just kind of explain that a little bit, Caleb.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think back to the old ways, high carbon steels, basic steel, it's it's iron with carbon in it, and you'd have to take ingot and you'd have to smelt it down and mush it together. And I'm going to put this as simply as I can so that it makes the most sense to most people. You got to take your core elements and smash them all together and work out the imperfections and impart the carbon to it so that it's hardenable. And that's kind of the old way. That's forging. That's even forging ingot today. If you go into the hot rolled processes they use in steel factories and manufacturing, they're basically just melting all the elements that make steel together and smushing them out into plates and sheets. The particle and powder metal processes, which they're slightly different but virtually the same kind of thing, is taking fine grain particles of those elements in the steel and then forcing them together in heat and vacuum at the same time in a more even distribution. So at the end of the day, what you get from a high carbon, hot rolled steel or hot smelted steel versus a modern Powder metal steel or particulate metal steel is just finer grain structure, better alloy combinations, and those translate to more consistency and control and uniformity in the steel itself overall. And you can add elements like chromium and vanadium and silicone and manganese and stuff like that that add different wear characteristics for the steel, for toughness, for edge retention, for sharpness, and just if you think of it like a honeycomb matrix, it's a finer structure of the honeycomb than what you would get with the hot forging process. So you take these really high grade steels like CPM 154 or my personal favorite RWL 34, which is the powder metal version of CPM 154, and it's made by Damas Steel in Sweden. It's very clean. It's the cleanest steel I've ever worked with, ever. And this is no questions asked. Damas Steel's RWL 34, when it comes to the polish, when it comes to the grain structure, the refinement, and all that, is the cleanest I've ever seen. And that process allows you to do that. It allows you to get as close to perfection in a high grade alloyed steel as you can. And the working characteristics of the knife at the end of the day are what matter. Like a knife is a using tool. At the end of the day, it's got to work for its intended, use, and it needs to work as best as possible and have the best chance of surviving and thriving in its application. So the powder metal steels and the CPMs and stuff like that from, it's kind of a process Crucible Industries pioneered back in the day. And they just tend to work better. They tend to work longer. They tend to work harder. They tend to be sharper. And some of them are so full of alloys and stuff like that they're really hard on materials and belts and really hard on users to actually sharpen. So you can go too far with it.
Right.
And alloys, you can go way too far with it, and there's a lot of steels out there that have fallen by the wayside because they went too far. I mean, if you make a product that's not usable end user to sharpen and keep sharp and work with in the field, then it frustrates them more than anything. So you might as well be using just a basic high carbon at that point.
Yeah, I mean that was even the case with S35, S35VN, S30VN. They're just if you don't have some sort of a belt grinder or some sort of mechanical sharpening capability, you're not going to rub that stuff. It will keep an edge forever, or at least a really long time. But once that edge is gone, it becomes very difficult to sharpen. And just like you said, and that's with knives, period, right? You're always trying to figure out. Everything is give and take. You're compromising toughness for blade retention and vice versa, or you're compromising edge retention for the fact that it's going to be really tough to sharpen. So it's all about, balancing those different characteristics and figuring out which for this knife, for its intended purpose, what is going to work the best for you. And that's always a challenge.
Yeah. And then you introduce the element of corrosion resistance in it too, like the traditional forging steels, the high carbon steels, they make fantastic blades. They're easy to sharpen. They're easy to maintain the edge in the field and that kind of things. They make great tough blades. You can make great swords out of them. Like W2 is one of my favorite high carbons. I make swords out of it. I make straight razors out of it. I make kitchen knives. I make everything out of it. You can make just about everything out of that knife steel. And it's excellent. It's razor sharp and it's easy to sharpen, but it will rust like a boat anchor. You know what I mean? And that can frustrate people as well if you don't maintain it and you don't keep your oil and keep your cleanliness going. Whereas something like the RWL 34 or CPM 154, it's really, really resistant to corrosion. And that's a great characteristic for people who just don't want to have to mess with it sometimes, because you still get your toughness, you still get your edge retention, you get the cleanness of the steel. The polish is amazing on them. And that's personal preference. I love polished knives. Like that's my jam. And you got to have really clean steels to do that and it look well. But it's a trade-off. Like you say, it's a trade-off. You can up your characteristics of stainless resistance, but it may be a little harder to sharpen.
Sure.
And you may, degrade your stainless characteristics going back to a high carbon, but it's going to be a little tougher. You can make a battle axe or a sword out of that sucker. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Yeah. And just the ones that aren't as hard are just going to be, like you said, more shock resistant. And that's why, you're not going to make a sword out of CPM 154 or, S35VN.
I was just looking at the price of CPM 154.
I mean, it's so upstairs.
That's high dollar stuff.
Look at the RWL 34.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was telling you this before the show, upstairs I got all these blanks of my designs that I have water jet, and all of that is like M390 Bowler, LMAX. That's what I had gotten into as far as those were the steels that were primarily using the Bowler steels, which I really liked. They were easy to grind. They were definitely on the harder side, but LMAX was I always found interesting because it was one of the best steels I could find as far as being extremely tough. You can make large Bowie / chopping blades out of it, and yet it's still held an edge like nobody's business. But it is really cool to see, and they're coming out with new steels almost yearly.
I did a podcast on that earlier, like a few months ago. I just get so tired of it. It's like steel fatigue. Like, holy crap! I'm using 30 years old now because it just works.
Well, I was talking to Bill Harsey one time, and in the past, how they had chosen all these steels was they had a steel that was designed for whatever it was usually tool steel. And they said, hey, you know what, this will make a good knife, and they would use that as a medium to make a knife. It wasn't until S30V that was like the very first steel that was ever specifically designed for knives. And since then we've had a lot of new steels that come out that are, again, they were engineered specifically for knife making, and that is really cool to see. And the fact that they're coming up with new ones all the time. But
it is. I mean, we're going to talk about MagnaCut, aren't we?
100%.
MagnaCut. Oh yeah, MagnaCut is probably the most recent created for specifically knife applications. Laren Thomas created it, and genius of a guy when it comes to metallurgy. And I have a love-hate relationship with MagnaCut. It is an absolute monster to work.
Yeah.
It makes a great blade. It really does.
You go through your body weight and belts on that thing?
Oh my gosh, especially after it's finished or heat treated. It's easy to heat treat. I mean, it's a very pleasant steel to work when it's annealed and soft and you haven't made a knife out of it yet. But once you make a knife out of it and harden that sucker, it is just not fun to work, and it does not polish well or anything like that. But it's the newest hot thing, and so many people love it. But I went through a phase and I tested it and I did all my things with it. But man, I still keep coming back to the CPM 154 series of steels because they just stinking do everything I need them to do. And they don't complicate my life like Magna. Like, holy crap, my belt expenses just went up through the roof with that stuff. Like,
right.
But it's funny because the 154 CM, you're talking about how things were just applied to knife applications. 154 CM was actually developed as a turbine fan blade steel.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
For turbine engines, back in the day, for jet engines and stuff like that, because it was high heat resistance and all this stuff. And then somebody got the wild idea to use it in a knife steel and realize how wonderful it is. Like, and then every iteration since then has kind of improved into the powder metal process. But the S3032 is oh my gosh, I tried that one in the early days, and I won't ever do that again.
Yeah. S30, even S35V, which was a little better, was definitely an improvement on that. But and really even LMAX and M390, I mean, once they're super soft and easy to grind, but as soon as you throw those in the kiln and once they're heat treated, you better have been done.
Yes. Yeah.
M390
though, I will say M390 is the only thing I've seen out there that is comparable to the RWL34 in its polish, the mirror polish, how high quality is and how great it look. And it's got real similar working characteristics, maybe even an improvement in some areas over the CPM series of steel, the 154 series. But it's expensive too. Holy smokes.
Yep.
I thought about switching the catalog over to M390 this year, but it's just getting it in quantities, sizes, and shapes that I need is just like I don't need to spend that kind of money right now. I'll just call Dama Steel.
I was actually lucky because at the time when I first got into knife making and I first started, having blanks, buying sheaths and then having blanks cut via water jet, there was a company in Seattle which was just like 45 minutes away that would carry steel and then also had a water jet. And so at the time, fairly inexpensively, I could order those sheets of steel.
Inexpensively.
It was it was expensive, but it would probably be a quarter of the cost then that it is
now.
It is now between
Good, all that steel
between
in the
getting it
garage
cut.
appreciated.
Oh,
It's like gold bar sitting up there.
Yeah,
You can get good money for that right now.
All right.
guarantee
Anything
it.
you want to get rid of?
We can talk. I'll send you some blanks.
Sorry.
So Caleb, I have a question. So
Yes.
I'm looking for a midlife crisis hobby, and watch this TV shows and stuff like that. But now that hearing you all talk, I kind of wanted to do the forging, and now hearing you all talk about doing stock removal sounds a little more entry level, I guess I would say, instead of having to buy all the accoutrement to get into it. My two questions were for you. For your tempering process, I've seen a lot of people use either tempering ovens or just using the propane forge. Which one do you prefer on that? And then also my next question would be on top of that is what is the best liquid to temper in? Which type of oil works best that you have found over your tenure doing it?
Okay, you're talking about quenching versus
Yes.
Okay, so when it comes to the high grade steels, you need a kiln, no questions asked. You have to have a kiln. Your thermal control needs to be precise. You don't have to get the most expensive kiln on the market. I used the pottery kiln for years, but it needs to be precise. It needs to be exact, and it needs to be in that range because they have a very short range of usable temperatures to harden them at. And you just quench in plates, though. That's the beauty of the high grade steels doing stock removal. Most of them are air hardening, so you just pull them out and sandwich them in between two aluminum plates, and that's your quench.
Gotcha. So you put it in a vise and just clamp it in there and just liver sit.
Easy peasy. And,
okay.
Let it cool down, throw it in the freezer overnight, and then you do your temper the next day in that same kiln at really low speeds. You can also temper in a household oven if you really need to, because you're looking at 350 to 400 degrees in most cases. Now, when it comes to forging in high carbon steels like that, they're easier to heat treat in a lot of ways. They have a broader range of useful heat temperatures you can work at when you're austenitizing, meaning getting the steel up to temperature for the quench. The quenchants is where you can get into some squirrely aspects like W2 or 1095 are two of the most common high carbons out there, and two that I've had the most experience with. They're oil quenching steels, so you have to. I can get them up to temperature in my forge just fine. Like I have a little mini soup can forge I've used for years and years and years with W2. So you don't need as precise of control as your high grade steels. You can get away with. You can eyeball it. You can look at the color. You can learn that with somebody who's got a little experience can show you that pretty quickly. And then you kind of just let it soak at that range of 1450 degrees or so. And then you pull it out and quench it in your oil. Now, if your oil is not the right type of quenchant or it's not at the right temperature, then you're not going to get a proper harden. The good thing with that is that some of those steels are very forgiving. You can just go again. I prefer for the hyper, they call them hyper eutectoid steels. I'm not going to pretend I know what that word means. Basically high carbon steels with a lot of really great characteristics and alloys in them, more than just carbon and iron. So they have some other stuff in them, like W2 has manganese in it, I believe, and maybe vanadium. I think I'd have to look at the spec sheet. I haven't looked at it in years, but you need a fast quench for those, what they call a fast quench. So you're looking at for 1095 or for W2, the hyper eutectoid steels on that line with higher carbon contents. The fast quenches are like Parks 50. And I use a quench called DT48 from Maxim Oil down in Texas, and they're specifically formulated for getting that knife blade. You know, once you come out of your oven, you got to get it down below 12 to 1300 degrees really quickly. We're talking within seconds, and it's a little bit more of a complicated process than I can fully explain here. I'd have to show you,
and also. Not too quickly, like.
Well, I've seen a lot of people put hot steel in it to bring the temp up of that oil as well, but not too hot.
You go too quick, and you're going to get a warp. You're going to
yeah.
One of the first knives I ever made was 1095, and I was like, I know they said to quench it in oil. I think I can do it in water.
And water, right?
And that knife looked like this.
Looked like it had Peyronie's disease.
As soon as you put it in, you're at reek.
Yep.
I can cut around corners now.
And then not knowing anything, instead of like actually tempering it and then maybe trying to pull a bend out of it, I was like, oh, maybe now that it's hardened, I'll try to I'll try to bend it straight.
Yeah, and it just
Snap
snapped
that
it.
knife.
Snap. That's an
heartbeat.
easy recipe for snapping a knife, breaking a knife, bending a knife, and yeah. The hyper, like you was saying though, you cool them down a specific time frame, couple seconds, but not too fast.
Mm-hmm.
Other steels like 1084. 1084 is the foundation of a forging steel. Most of the Damascus you'll see on people's tables, like the ABS guys and stuff, they've got 1084 and 15N20 as their Damascus. 1084 is probably the most forgiving knife steel on the planet. You can quench it in canola oil, dirty bath water, whatever you got. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't really put it in bath water, but I've quenched it in canola oil. I've quenched it in Parks. I've quenched it in DT48. I've quenched it in old transmission oil. I've quenched it in some kind of oil I found in a can. I don't actually know what it was. It's really forgiving. I love 1084 for training people and teaching people this stuff because it's super, super forgiving and it's super easy to make hard, to get hard. And then you give it a couple tempers for a half hour, whatever, hour at least, at 350, and you got yourself a good using knife. You can beat the snot out of it in the woods, you know? Did that answer?
Yeah, I never knew there after you. It just comes from me watching YouTube videos and stuff, trying to figure it out on my own. I'm pretty handy, but I didn't realize after you forged it and got it to, and then did the quench. I didn't realize there was a temper step afterwards after you quenched it.
Yeah, the full thermal process. I'll give you the full breakdown of what it in the simplest way possible to get the most out of a knife, any knife. The forging process from the factories, the smelting process, introduces a lot of stress. The forging it yourself, hammering it to shape or grinding it to shape, grinding not as much, but definitely forging it to shape introduces stress as well. So the first thing you need to do is normalize it, getting up to near austenitizing temperature and just letting it calm down, letting all the grain refinement happen and it just kind of go back into a normal solution and calm down from the stress introduced to it. Then you can harden it, and the hardening it process is getting it up to that austenitic temperature to where it goes non-magnetic. In high carbons, it's around 450 to 1500, and in the high alloy steels, it's 1950 or thereabouts, maybe 2000, 2100 degrees. Different ranges within there will give you different hardnesses and stuff like that, and there's a lot more to the recipes than that, but that's your basics. That's your austenitic temperature. Means it's non-magnetic. Everything's in solution. And then you got to harden it. You get it in your quench, whether it's plate quench, air quench, or oil quench. Some of them are water quench. W2 is a water quench. You can actually do that and it won't break it most of the time. Sometimes. I've definitely broke it a couple times, so I don't know. I don't think on that one. But you get it down, that hardens the steel to the hardest it's going to get with your process. There's also an annealing step prior to that you can do with when you're forging. Most guys I know will normalize and then anneal, meaning fully soften their steel again after they've shaped it and ground it. So they've fully relaxed the steel, got it back to just juicy, creamy, smooth, workable and stuff like that. And then you go in your hardening cycle, get it hard. And then after it's fully hardened, then you need to go in a tempering cycle. Now, what the tempering cycle does is it draws your hardness back to a more usable level, and it basically de-stresses the steel from the hardening process in such a way that it won't break. Because you take a knife straight out of hardening, like you find out with 1095, you get it really hard in the water, and then you try to bend it, it's going to snap. And that's pretty much the rule with just about any steel. You can snap it right out of the harden. They're like glass in a lot of ways. So you draw that glass aspect of it back, and you help get rid of the retained austenite in it and stuff like that, forming martensite. Martensite is the molecular structure you want in a hardened knife steel. So you're just trying to maximize that, chemical or molecular relationship happening there. And the tempering is the last step in that to draw it down into that useful knife range for the edge retention and stuff like that. For the knife application you're going, some of them can be a little harder, some of them need to be less. Like a sword is something you would temper back a little bit further than you normally would with a knife.
The flexibility of it, yeah.
Right, exactly, because you want it to bend and flex and take the damage without breaking. And your edge retention is not going to be nearly as high,
right.
But the sucker's going to not break either. And if you really needed to bend it back in place on a battlefield, you could.
Mm-hmm. Huh.
That's the basic breakdown. It applies to just every knife steel out there.
Chris, I got a belt grinder right over there.
Yeah, man.
We got
Got a
we got
kiln and
steel
a-
up there. I got a multiple $1,000 even heat up there.
Yeah.
It hasn't been used in like 10 years, so we can get you busting out some knives, no problem.
Winter's coming.
Maybe not start out on the M390, you know, just like start out on some 1084.
We're gonna go get some 1095 from Lowe's.
1095,
I got some leaf springs sitting in the
What,
backyard.
what
We'll
do we
start
have
there.
it there? LMAX and
It's LMAX and M390, and I think I have a few blanks of S35V in as
yeah, I
well.
think so too.
But yeah, you know, I think learning to grind on, you know, what I learned on was again just getting some square blanks from, you know, pieces of stock 1095, and if you can learn to grind on that, once you get to the softer steels, your bevels are going to look good.
Yeah.
I remember running all over the Seattle area, collecting supplies and finding this and getting that, and
Yep.
you know, all for this knife making venture.
Liner material, freaking
Yes.
Kydex.
Oh, we needed certain bolts and nuts for the. He originally built his own grinder,
yeah.
Right.
and then before he got the Travis.
That one's got a lot of
TW90, the
TW90.
Travis Wirtz.
that
Yeah.
one over there's got a lot of dust on it.
Anyway,
Shoo-wee.
we would just run all over collecting parts and pieces and supplies, and it was like
Spacer material. I
It
was
was
always
like
trying new
every
stuff.
weekend. That's what we would do. We'd run out and collect supplies and grab a
Oh,
lunch
man.
and head
I
back
threw
to the
away a
house.
lot of boxes of that kind of crap too that my wife helped me chase down.
100%.
Yeah.
We moved last year, because we moved from New Hampshire last year, and she's like, "Are you really ever going to use this? Because we're clearing out the shop, and I've been dug in for 7 years there, and
Yeah.
if you're not going to use this, please get rid of it now, because we're moving away from the country." So
Well, you do all your own leather sheath work too. I mean, that's
I was going to
another-
ask him that too.
That's
yeah.
another
A
art
skill
and
all of
skill
itself.
unto itself.
So yeah,
yeah, to me, it's part of the process. I mean, honestly, if you're going to sell handcrafted knives to people, or even custom or mid-tech or whatever,
100%.
and it's a fixed blade, they
I
got
completely disagree with both of you because I hated making
He
sheaths.
hated
Yeah.
Kydex.
I hated Kydex. I had no interest in getting into leather. But man, I respect anybody that does either one of those really well.
So do you have the sewing machine and everything, Caleb?
No, I just do it by hand.
Oh, do you really? And that's I tell you what, it's pretty uniform for by hand, brother.
Sucks.
I mean, I swore it was a machine.
The stinking machine. I mean, like I built my shop in cash. Like I've been building it slowly over the last 15 years. And
Yeah.
every time you get into a new process, you do it by hand at first and you're like, okay, this is cool. But then you're like, I'm never going to make a living doing it this way. And you realize what else you need. And you know, some of these machines are $2,000-$3,000 a piece. The leather sewing machines can be $5,000-$6,000 easy.
Yeah.
And I just haven't wanted to bite the bullet on that yet. Like every time I go to buy it, I'm like, but I could get this kind of grinder or this. I could get more steel. I'll just do it by hand, whatever.
Hey, I wouldn't quit what you're doing.
I know, right?
That looks good as shit, brother.
And the thing is, I could do Kydex sheaths for everything, but I despise Kydex. I absolutely hate it. I love the functionality of it, and for duty stuff, like on my gear and stuff, I carry some stuff in Kydex sheaths on my gear and all that crap. But I hate it. I hate doing it. I love leather. I love the way it looks. I don't always love doing it because some of the stuff gets complicated and you're just trying to sell this knife and get it out there. But what are you going to send it in? A shoebox? You know what I mean? What are they going to carry that around in their pocket?
Yeah.
Right.
There's more feeling and life to leather too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It builds character to the knife, and then instead of shoving it in a piece of Kydex.
Yeah, and you can smell it. You can feel it, and
Yeah.
it's tangible. I mean, it's got a primitive aspect to it. It's got a medieval aspect to it.
Absolutely.
And functionally, it's if you make them right. I mean, guys are jumping into Normandy with stuff like this. Less quality than this. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, you know, you can make it work, and you can make it work really well, and then you work out your system and your pattern, and eventually one day you'll get a sewing machine. Maybe. I could have bought one.
Eventually one day.
One day you have your own leather sheath making department. That's the key. Some master craftsmen over there just doing sheaths.
The problem is, then I got to pay them and let them in my workspace. And
It's
that's
a
why
problem.
that's why I had kids. I mean, like I'm going to teach them to sew leather and stuff like that. I'm going to set them up on a little machine, and they can just crank out my leather sheaths for me. That'd be great.
That was my business plan too, and I got to tell you, it doesn't work out quite
No.
that way.
The kids know
But-
how to do some of the skills that we need done. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
just
It's-
getting those little wormy butts down in chairs to do the skills.
My 10-year-old's the most enthusiastic. He's the one that is.
Ours too.
He would carry a sword around if I let him, and he just wants. I came home with a knife from a buddy of mine, Matt Chase, Hogtooth Knives. I bought one of his EDC fixed blades off his table over there. And first thing that kid does, like, can I have it? Is that mine? I'm like, dude, did you go pay the money for it? No, this is mine, buddy. Get out of here. He's like, well, can I have one? I'm like, yeah, as soon as you earn the money to buy one, you can.
Yeah.
Like, I can make you one. Like, we're making him one right now. I've got one on the wall for him. And he's like, hey, can I pick out my handle materials? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he's like, can I help you grind it? I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. That's just, no, not at all. But he's, of course, goes and rummaging through my drawer, and he picks out a piece of mammoth, a fossil walrus ivory. And he's like, this is what I want.
Of course you do.
You got good taste, man.
Awesome. Sounds good. I said you can have it, so here we are. And that's what he's
That's a
getting
good
for his
question,
birthday this year.
Here's actually a really good question. If you guys want, again, throw up some questions. We'll try to make sure that we get to them one way or the other, whether we take them in the immediate or toward the end. But this is definitely something to be aware of.
Okay. That the one on the screen there?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
All right. Negatives leaving a knife in leather sheath as far as moisture corrosion. Yes. You can get a lot of crap in Kydex that scratches blades up, and you can get moisture in there too, but they tend to dry out a little more. Leather is one of those things. If it's a high carbon knife, I always caution my customers not to leave them in there long term. You can leave them in there a little time. I mean, I have some W2 knives that have been sitting in leather sheaths for years and I forgot about, and they're fine. But I also coat and cover the inside of my sheaths with leather balm and wax and stuff like that. I seal them up really good so that they don't retain that moisture. That it kind of acts like a moisture and vapor barrier. And the way I treat my knives, with the stainless, it's really not that big a deal. You can have at it, leave it in there for years. I always put a drain hole in the back of my sheaths, so they do get a little bit of airflow. I'll make sure they're nice and sealed up and everything's dried out before I put anything together. But yeah, any kind of common knife, high carbons especially, you want to make sure that you're making sure they're oiled. And I wouldn't, if your sheath gets wet, that's when you have the most problems. Like if you've gotten your knife or sheath wet or bloody out in the field and that kind of thing, and you forget to clean it up, then you could have some problems. It's rare. It's rare if you're taking basic care of your stuff and just kind of being a little bit cognizant of what you're doing. Most of the time, it's not a worry.
Yeah, and that's one thing to be aware of too, as far as even the stainless. So like how I would always finish my knives. Again, these were like strictly like combat knives. I didn't want them to be reflective or anything like that. I would actually do a sandblast finish on them. And unlike a polished knife, even especially when you have a sandblasted finish like that, even a highly corrosive resistant steel, if left in a sheath or any of those things long term, those will still rust, or they'll still oxidize.
Yes.
Usually it's really more just surface, like again, LMAX, S35V, and I've seen all those things get surface rust on them, and they can definitely get to the point where they look ugly. Usually pretty easy to clean up, but even some of the more higher performance steels, when it comes to corrosive resistance, they definitely can rust. But the way that, when you're doing a high polish, folks, it definitely adds a lot of additional rust resistance as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it closes up your grain structure on the skin of the knife, so to speak. And it minimizes surface contact, and it makes it easier for waters and oils and stuff like that to shed and to not be retained in the cracks and crevices of the microstructure. So yeah, like you said, anything can rust. There's any knife steel out there in the world can rust. If I took this is a CPM 154 knife, and if I put a blowtorch to it with some water on the backside, it's going to rust it immediately.
Yeah.
Or skin immediately. And if I got my sheath knife and nice and funkied up and blood and all that stuff in there and just left it
Salt water.
Salt water's a monster. So yeah, I mean, if I dunk this thing in salt water and put it on the back porch for a week, it ain't gonna look the same when the week's over.
No.
Everything's, no matter how bad, how much you seal the sheath off and do use your waxes and stuff, and no matter how polished your blade is, if you put it in really bad environments and you don't clean up the mess afterwards, it's gonna rust on you.
100%.
Some of them just take longer than others.
100%. Yeah. So, one of the questions I used to always get was, Gary, why are your knives so expensive? So talk a little bit about that, Caleb, the difference between even some of the high-end production knives versus, a handmade knife.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a tool. It's just a using tool, right? And most of us think of it that way. It's like, I can go to Walmart and get them. Yeah, you can. You can go to Walmart and get them. You can go to Walmart or Bass Pro Shop or whatever, and you can find some really high grade knives that are carrying a lot of the same steel types as us custom makers use too. And they're going to be good knives and they're going to work for you. But you're paying for more than that when you pay a custom maker or you pay for a handmade knife. Yes, you're paying for the time it takes to make it, the quality, the care. You're paying for the relationship. In my eyes, you're paying for the relationship with a craftsman. You're paying for the time it took them to learn the skills. Mm-hmm. And generally, there's a lot more thought and process that go into a handcrafted knife. And the price, this is probably one of the hardest conversations in the handcrafted or knife community is the price. You know, what is it that you're paying for? And yeah, it's the craftsmanship, it's the artistry, it's the quality. The quality is generally
attention to detail that you're not going to get from a production knife.
Absolutely. And it's the attention to the customer too, like the relationship you're going to get with an individual who made your work, who made the knife that you use every day. And I think more than anything, we pay for that quality and relationship. When we pay for our custom stuff like high-end guns. I used to build rifles. I had an FFL and I built rifles for a little while, custom rifles. And yeah, they're not your Walmart special, Savage Axis and stuff like that. They're higher quality, higher price, and people perceive it to be that way when they see price is perception of quality in a lot of ways, Mm-hmm. And when we look for fine things, or when we look for things that have a legacy to them, something we can leave behind, something we can pass down, you don't go looking for cheap stuff to do that. Like can I use an example real quick?
Absolutely.
This is, I know the people on the podcast can't see it, but this is the dagger that my great grandfather made as a teenager when he was 14 or 15, 16, somewhere around that age. He took an old file, some brass, and a piece of walnut, and he ground this out. I don't even know how. I didn't get and it's just peened on, a peened through handle. He made this thing over 100 years ago.
Wow.
That's priceless to me.
Sure.
It's priceless. And it's just a high carbon steel that he made from a file. He didn't actually, smelt this out and do the whole thing. He made it from a file, from what I understand, from what I've gotten in the story. And he ground it out with an old rough angle grinder and stuff like that, and hand files. And I don't even know he died before I was old enough to get the full story out of him. But he created that over 100 years ago. And it's something like that is priceless to me. And it's something I'm going to pass down to my kids. And I have my own personal knives that, I'm going to use. I've made for myself. I'm going to beat them up, and then I'm going to pass them down to my kids. And that's a relationship and a legacy. And most, there's a specialness to it that you can't find in Walmart. You can't mm-hmm. find in a store-bought knife in most cases.
Even the high-end knives too. And you brought up a good point. One of my goals, I literally don't own one of my own knives.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, I definitely want to make sure that every one of my kids end up getting a knife that I made. But the other part of that too is, and I think this has changed a little bit, but I know going back 10 years ago, part of it too was a heat treat, right? You're very controlled with the heat treat, going back to, the 2010, 2011 time period. When you're doing a production knife, even a really expensive high-end production knife, for the most part, they're doing kind of large batch heat treats.
Yeah.
And it is, I think they've gotten it better now, but I know then it was pretty much impossible to get the level of precision that you could get with the heat treat from one knife to another.
For sure,
making one at a time. They take a big batch of these, they heat them up, all of them. They're going to quench different. If you start testing the hardness of those knives, whether you're talking about the edge or the spine, a spectrum that you're going to see.
And there's an spectrum in the manufacturing world,
100%.
And it's, the quality is not the same. And that, I guess as a foundation, that is the foundation of it. As custom makers, what our customers can hope for from us is just in general a higher quality overall, and more attention to that quality and specificity and something special and unique about each knife. Because even if you say you have a pattern knife, I have a lot of knives that are on my catalog as patterns. Each one of them is a little different. They're
Right.
each going to be a little different. They're each going to be special in their own way. They may have different imperfections, if you want to call it that, in different places. And there's just characteristics that make them each special to the individual that ends up with it and what they do with it. And that it's way more attention to that, way more of a personal relationship with that, both as the user and as the maker. And I think that's the beauty of the craft. I mean, being in Blade Show this last weekend reminded me of how enthusiastic the collectors are and the customers are, and the people that are just knife aficionados that are not actually makers. They love this stuff. They love it as much as we do. And they love the aspects of not just the factory stuff and the mid-tech stuff and the exciting things that everybody's coming out with every year with their companies and stuff like that, and all the guys doing great, wonderful work. But they love the individuals, the people who do this stuff, and the different characters you can meet and the different types of knives they make. I mean, you can walk around that room and see 1,000 different types of knives every day, and nothing's the same. And some things are all the same, and it's beautiful. It's just part of the craft, and it's the same with any art form, I think. And this is just more,
Yeah, no, I think, going back to the price of a custom knife, the other thing that you're doing is you're investing your money in keeping that art form alive, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That is I think probably one of the most important parts of this, because there's not too many, there never was, but there definitely is a lot less full-time knife makers today than there probably has ever been.
Yeah.
Just because of, it's a hard process to learn. It's expensive to do. It's super time consuming, especially in, this world where everybody's, everybody has ADHD. And for the few people that can sit there behind that grinder and just grind out a knife hours at a time, and then spend the time putting it into the kiln, heat treating it, tempering it, going through and make sure that sitting down and sewing leather all day, there's not too many people out there that are willing to do that. And, I think that's a huge part of this. Everybody complains about things that aren't made in America anymore. And then at the same time, we sell a lot of products that are made in America, and I can't tell you how many times, if it's on a YouTube video or just on our website or whatever else, like, why does this cost so much? Well, because it's a high quality piece of equipment that you're not going to find made by in Chinese or whatever else. But if you want quality and you want to make sure that at least the option of a quality product is always there, you better get behind it, and you better support it, and you better spend, your money when and where you can on something that again, you're just keeping that art alive. And I think that's something that we often don't think about.
I agree. And I find myself, this last weekend, honestly, I found myself walking into Blade Show and thinking about it. Like, I haven't bought and supported my fellow makers. I haven't bought from or supported my fellow makers in a long time. It's been a lot of, the last few years, there's been a lot of change. We moved, and, things were getting stupid, expensive, and economically, I was like, but you know what? That's what's going to keep this alive, is just us people who are passionate about this, feeding and sewing into, our friends and in our fellow peers and our craftsmen. So I went and bought, some knives this weekend from custom makers, and one of them was my good friend. And I was like, I'm going to make it personally, I'm making it a point to do that, to actually sew into the others who are trying to keep this craft alive, and show them support. Like, I love your work. I love the fact that you do this. I know I can go home and make whatever knife I want. I can make it however I want. There isn't anything on the spectrum out there that I can't make, but I like what you do, and I want to support that. You know what I mean? And that's what I've been trying to purpose myself to do personally this year.
Yeah. And, all that other stuff aside, there's something super magical, folks, about when you have a custom handmade knife in your hand. Like, you can me personally, I can just sit there and stare at that forever. I can get a $1,000 production knife, and you'll check it out, and it's cool and it's nice to have, but it doesn't have the I don't know, the riz, as my kids would say. It doesn't have the riz that a handmade
I'm not sure
knife.
you use that correctly, but
It's
probably not.
It's that magic. You know what I mean? It's that magic. It's that And like John Walsh, that's perfect. People will pay $1,200 for a cell phone. It's out of date in a couple of years, but a quality knife will last for generations. And that John, you summoned it up proper, man, because that's exactly what I try to build in my knives. It's like something that will outlast everyone who puts their hand on it.
100%.
A knife and a tool that can be used long after its original owner is passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we live in a disposable world where everything is disposable. Even $1,200 cell, you're gonna spend $12, $14, $15, $2,000 on a cell phone. Never mind the plan that you're gonna buy with that and spend on a monthly basis as well. But we know we're gonna throw that thing away in 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. Most of this, every time a new iPhone's coming out, we're gonna buy that. But yet, the same people will absolutely balk at spending $800, $900 for something that someone has spent 20, 30 hours plus into, and it's just an interesting way to look at things for sure.
It is. It's a backwards thought process. But you know what? There are people out there that still love and do this. That buy this stuff. Like I had a customer this last weekend. I'm gonna call him out. His name's Andrew. He's awesome. He didn't like polishing knives until he came to the pit table and he started looking at some of my polished knives, and he already bought one of my fighters from me, a satin one. And then he comes back the next day and he just, after having spent 24 hours with his other knives that he got from me, and just like said, just looking at it and enjoying that, the magic of it, of that relationship and the handmade quality stuff, he came back and bought another one. And he's reaching out, he's talking about a third one already. And they were some of the more expensive ones I had on the table, and almost to the most expensive blades I've ever sold. And it didn't, the money didn't matter. It was like I said, it was a relationship. It was that quality, that magic, that riz, that that item has that you can't get from a factory.
No, absolutely not. And it never will. You can, there's definitely some, really well made production knives out there that are genuine performance tools. But again, all the little details, all the design features that every knife maker spends hours kind of putting together and making every single knife unique. I know, like, I'm sure you do the same. And just looking at your catalog, what you got, I constantly use different handle material, different just like you said, you have a blade profile that kind of had a standard, but you change it up every now and then, throw some swedges on there. Every now and then I throw, a double edge on there, but it's just cool to be able to do that. And it makes it fun as a maker too. You don't want to make the same exact knife over and over and over again. I mean, why? One of the other, that's a really good point too, is the fact that, why do you want a knife that everybody else has when you can have something 100% unique each and every time? Yeah.
I'm a little bipolar when it comes to creative stuff. My wife calls me a moody artist. So yeah, I throw my catalog away about every 2 years. I go and just turn the tables over, throw everything away and start over. That's what I did this year. Honestly, I started designing again an entire new catalog based off an old style that I'd originally wanted to. Basically similar to what Robert Lovelace has done in the past with split guards and, kind of like say the old way of doing things, the older
right.
And so I threw everything away on my catalog and I started redesigning an entire new line of fighting knives and combat knives. And that was my original love when I came into this. And I used to do a lot of them, and then I kind of got away from it, and I got into like doing frame lock folders and doing EDCs in hunting knives. And then I tried the art knife thing too, which I really want to delve more into that later, doing art knives and high-end daggers and swords. But I had to throw it all away this year and start over. Like, let's bring back some of that old school and see if I can't marry it with my now gained experience, more knowledge than I had. I've gained more experience than I had and maturity as a craftsman. Like, let's bring some of the old stuff back and see if I can't marry it with my new style and make a really cool catalog. And people responded really well to it at Blade Show. I mean, there was a lot of great response. So, that was pretty exciting too. That fired me up for another year of, till I change it again. We'll see.
Just curious, how many blades did you take to Blade Show with you?
15. Well, I had 16 with me, but one of them, by the time I got there, I decided that nobody would ever see that one. So just not need to see the light of day. It was the last CPM3V knife I will ever make.
Really?
CPM3V is another one of those steels that I just cannot get on board with. After years,
I
and
thought
years
you meant
of
you wanted to
trying,
keep it for yourself.
I will keep it for myself. Do my best to break it. I'm gonna break that thing like it owes me money, because I just can't get a good finish on it that I like on 3V, and it's so tough after heat treating that it's just no fun to work with anymore.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't give me the finish qualities that I like. Usability is a great steel. 3V is a great steel for using, and it's got a broad range of useful categories. But I just won't ever do it again. Like I've been beating that dead horse for about 5 years now, and I finally got the last piece of steel done, and I took it to Blade Show. And I was like, no, this ain't going on the table. Like, I just can't. So I threw it back in the pack, and I'm going to bring it home. You know. But
what do you use to edge and sharpen your knives? Are you doing that on the grinder as well?
Yeah, I use a hollow wheel on the grinder. I actually grind them in with a hollow. I set the main bevel with like a dull 120 to get that first bevel in, and then I clean them up to a 600 grit on the belt. I have a specific belt I leave aside just for that, and then I strop and polish them, or just strop them. If I need to clean up the edge anywhere, I'll do it with a ceramic rod, just to kind of true things if I need to, but I rarely do anymore. I can just kind of freehand it on the grinder now after all these years of doing it. I finally got a rhythm down for whip it on there, and then strop them on leather. And I try to get them up to the point where they still have that kind of, the 600 grit leaves a little bit of a toothy edge for that.
Yep.
A real gritty, nice, ripping edge, but you can polish it up to pop hair and shave with still too. So it's kind of good balance. I mean, you can go further, like on the kitchen knives. I may get my Japanese Waterstones out and go up to like 2,000 or 3,000. On if I do a straight razor, which I haven't done in years, I'll go up to like 8K, and then micron polish and stuff like that, because those are, you don't want to rip your face up with that sucker, So but usually for my working edges and my working knives, I end up at about a 18 to 20 degree angle, and sometimes 25 on the thicker stuff, and 600 grit with a strop, and that seems to be a good all around. I've been doing all my
I got to tell Caleb something before we get into the next topic.
Yeah, send it.
Caleb, thank you for bringing a smile to my face. For you pulling up.
I hate it. I
For
hate it
you,
when you smile.
you got me all nostalgic. You pulled up your great granddad's thing.
Yeah.
To me, I have one thing of my great granddad. He was born. I don't know how you made that. He was born and raised in the hills of West Virginia, and I have something that you can is a tool as well.
Yep.
But you usually cook with it and you use it. But I just think it's really neat that you have something from your great granddad that's still a tool. And the kids, I don't know, kind of got in my heartstrings a little bit. The kids these days are losing that, or even our generation, because you're about our age. I mean, you're 40 couple. You know what I mean?
40. I'll be 45 next week. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 40, so you're in the age range. But even our generation, I would say it's 1 or 2 out of 10 even have something from their great granddad that they would even want to pass down. You know what I mean? And we're slowly losing that. And from that, for the 2 out of 10, it's going to go to 1 for the next generation. After that, it's going to be 0.5 or 0.25 of a person is going to have something to pass down. So I think it's really crucial or critical to be able to look back at the past and have stuff like that, that badass knife. Yeah. You know what? It works. It does what it's supposed to. Your great granddad made it, handmade it, as did mine with my thing I have. It's just, you don't have that anymore in this throwaway society. And I think we need to instill that a little bit more in the younger generation of, look, buy a little bit higher quality.
Yep.
Or make it what you need to do and continue to use it and pass it on to show your kids how to use it. And you know what? I'll be the first person to tell you, I need to probably instill a little bit more in my boy. Hey, buy a little bit higher quality or use this older piece of equipment and make it work for what you're doing so you can continue this.
Yep.
I think we're losing value of everything anymore in this throwaway society compared to where our forefathers were even 25 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, no question. But I believe we can bring it back. I fully do. I mean, it's about
I hope we can.
teaching that next generation, which I'm making it a point to do with my boys. Like, it's not about the money. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at it, at the end of the day, it's not about the money. Let's drop it right here. This is a $1,200 knife. This is what I sell them for. It's a combat knife / it's a fighting buoy.
Fighting knife, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it can be used in the field for just about anything, right? You can you can carve with
Skin a deer with
I
it.
mean, skin a deer, you can whittle with it. I mean, name it.
Yeah, you can do just about anything you need to do with a knife right here with a simple blade, clipped buoy, simple handle. $1,200 is a lot of stinking money.
You're not wrong.
But you buy it one time. You buy something like this, even if it's not that high, say go $500-$600. You buy it one time, and the quality that it is, and the guarantee of a person like me says, if you break it doing something normal, I'm gonna fix it because that means I failed. But I'm not gonna fail you, and neither is that knife. You know what I mean? That money won't matter anymore in 5 years.
Absolutely.
3 years.
3 months.
Yeah.
3 months. Yeah, 3 months. People will replace that with with a paycheck, and they don't care anymore. I don't like when I go buy guns and stuff like that, or high-end optics, or knives.
You know, I am very different
you're
than
not
you,
wrong,
Caleb.
Caleb.
I stress about
Oh my
spending money.
God! I didn't bring my hip
I mean,
waders. Jesus.
when I spend money, I
shit's
just
getting deep
bring my
over here.
hands over it for a really long
I
time.
stress enough for the both of us.
I don't really buy that. I'm looking at your wall.
Yeah, no
I
doubt.
know, right?
No
not
doubt.
buying that.
Right?
There's one there without an optic on it. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
sitting somewhere.
It's right over
Where's
there.
your scope for that guy? Like, I don't believe you at all. Like,
Yeah.
like the money disappears. It comes and goes, right? But the object and the thing and the special of it. I mean,
See,
I
Summer?
hope that my kids say, "Oh, remember this?" When I'm dead, they're looking back through my old crap, and they're like, even if they don't make knives and they don't care anymore, they're like, "Oh yeah, Dad's knife. I still have it. Do you still have the one he made you?" And they show it to their kids, and then their kids are like, "Oh, Dad made that. That's awesome," you know. And they'll forget who I am in 100 years. Nobody's gonna give a crap who I am in 100 years. You know what I mean? But this thing will still be kicking around. Somebody will find this somewhere and be like, "Dude, wonder who that is. I wonder what it means. What does that mean on there?" You know,
If our government doesn't get to a point to where they try to confiscate everything and melt it down. No, you know,
They can't melt mine down. It's copper.
to hit
I
a
don't think they're really use it for much.
it's gonna say all gun laws are infringements, but that's what
No, Gary doesn't believe that.
to hit, I 100% support gun control.
No, you don't.
You know, just kind of touch on a few things
I saw your Instagram post.
that you hit on there. Number one, you know, the other thing that kids today, and again, even our generation don't realize is that what that knife represents, right? That's something that we don't think about, and kids today don't even consider. Like, if it doesn't bring me instant gratification, it's not of value to me.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that is embracing our history, our family history, our national history, which, again, you know, starting with our generation and moving forward, I think people are almost ashamed of any sort of history. And like we have 98% of this country's history is something to be, you know, really, really proud of.
Yeah.
And the struggles that our ancestors went through to make a living, to put food on the table, is something to be really, really proud of. We all, none of us are perfect. You know, this country was founded by extremely imperfect people,
You're perfect, Summer.
except for my wife. Everybody else
I had to
has
speak, I had to
flaws.
speak up real quick. Save that one,
I
Gary.
appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
She knows that she has an automatic
I knew I was excluded.
exclusion.
right,
Yeah,
right.
but you know, I do. I think, you know, whether it's traditional values, traditional tools, traditional everything. I do agree with what you're saying. I think there's going to be a resurgence of people realizing that, and I at least I hope so.
Well, I think part of that is also maturity level. So,
Yeah.
you know, even speaking for myself, as the years have gone on, I mean, I'm only 20, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. It's not
But
been
as
very
the
long.
years have gone on,
She's
I mean,
23.
I've always valued, I have some heirloom, you know, nothing expensive, but heirlooms that have been passed down to me from different people in my family, like an old chair that it looks like total crap, but it was my grandfather's great aunts. So things like that. But from a disposable world, on a maturity level, I find myself now really wanting to purchase and have a few things that I really enjoy using and that bring me happiness and joy to use, even in clothing, versus having a closet jam-packed full of things that I'm like, I don't really like any of this stuff. Or, you know, it's just kind of...
She puts me in the closet.
It's because she wants you to come out of it finally.
But I think that's part of a level of maturity as well. As you start to see more value in those things that you really enjoy.
No, I agree. I agree with
I
Summer.
definitely agree with that. I guess I question, I guess the maturity that it's ever going to be reached with certain generations.
No,
I mean,
that's a whole nother argument.
I just have doubts that there, the current generation will ever get to that point to where
I think some of that goes back to household
100%
parenting
it
because
does.
I mean, like even in our boys, and one's more emotional and sentimental than the other, or should I say sentimental? And even in our boys, I see. He had a football he was playing with at one of our last courses, and he ended up asking a couple of the instructors to sign it, and there was a couple of people that have YouTube channels there, and they signed the football, and now he's Mommy, this is my most prized possession. Can we please get a display case for it? Simple things like that. I think part of that goes back to the household, the parenting, the way they were raised too.
Well, I think there's less and less people instilling those types of values,
Sure.
and that's the challenge too.
Here's what I don't get. So this weird generation, I'm just going to say weird, so that way everything falls into it.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
Thanks, Ken. It is, and you fall in it with us. I don't understand what happened because we're all of us are in it. I mean, these people that are weird are a little bit younger by, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, but they're still in this millennial aspect. But it's just like, I don't understand what happened was so different from our upbringing that I don't want to say we're normal because, but still,
I have a theory.
I'd like to hear it.
I have a theory. It is always the loud minority that causes the most trouble. But before the advent of the internet and, social media and all that stuff, they could relatively be ignored by the normal people around them. Like, okay, yeah, anyway. Because when you have a room full of normal people or normalish people or people that share traditional values or just normal values, just like sane values, and you have a couple of really crazy people over here screaming at the top of their lungs, they get largely ignored. And they're like, okay, anyways, we're going to carry on with life. But now that you have this access where everyone
It's a platform.
of any depravity has access immediately to everyone else, there's no shutting those voices off, and they become the loud majority. And then when they move into positions where they can control that voice, where they can control the access points, it seems like there's more of them than us, and there's more of them than there really are. And there's going to be a pushback to that. The pendulum always swings. I mean, the world's gone through this kind of insanity before. If you think back to the time of World War I, World War II, 1916, during the communist revolutions and all that garbage that went on, it was a minority of people that caused that chaos.
Sure.
I mean, and they've inflamed the world and inflamed the national maturity of the nations and stuff that they were in and dumbed it down. And we're seeing a similar aspect here in this nation. And I think that it is going to swing. The pendulum is going to swing, and there will be a resurgence of the national maturity, just a national maturity and understanding heritage, legacy, and right and wrong. And
I like that. So you're saying, and just let me make sure I heard you right.
Yep.
You're essentially saying they have pushed that pendulum so far into our court that it's swinging up, and it's just going to take a couple of us to swing that SOB right back in their face. And
honestly, that historically, that's all it has taken. If you look at just,
I like that.
let's talk about 1770.
Chris is leaving here with hope tonight.
Oh, I'm
gonna
gonna
crush
grab
that
that
hope in a minute.
I believe in the indomitable spirit of the human being, of the human, us as human beings, as created beings. I believe we have an indomitable spirit for rightness and for goodness and for peace. You know what I mean? And that it can find its way back to the surface in most people, and just commonality and common thinking again about, hey, this is right, this is wrong, this is crazy, let's not do this anymore. Like everybody just take a minute, think about what actually matters, and let's get back to the basics. And it's taken extremes in human history to cause that swing in the pendulum. It's taken extreme wars, it's taken revolutions, it's taken social upheaval and unrest. You think about the civil rights movement and stuff like that. It took moments of extreme upheaval to change things that were wrong and had become acceptable. And we're living in an entire new generation of things that are wrong, and we know they are, but they've become acceptable, they've become celebrated. And it's like, that's not going to last. It's going to swing. And
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
between you and Caleb, because you've both been in the military, I have not. And I'm saying both of y'all, so y'all can both put your opinion in there. Do you think there is
Don't
going
tell
to
me
be?
where I can put my opinion.
All right, Caleb, do you think there is going to be an extreme upheaval, or is there going to be a softer upheaval for this? to turn the tide, to push the pendulum back. You know what I'm talking about.
Hard or soft, Caleb? Hard or soft?
Oh,
What do you think? What do you think? I'm not going to hold you to it. I'm not going to run down to your house and knock on your door and be like, told you so.
let's see. The hammer works. Let's just say that the hammer works, and it's only the hammer
Okay.
works, but it works in both directions. And I think seeking out peaceful resurgences of common sense are the best ways. You know what I mean? Like just the voice. The voice has more power than the hammer does at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And if everybody's super eager to use the hammer and nobody's willing to be like, hey, let's just all calm down, and we're not just saying on the side. A lot of times it's just saying no. Simple as that. Like, no, I'm not going to comply with that crap anymore. I'm not doing it.
You're not wrong.
Am I allowed? Can I
No,
insert my opinion now?
I absolutely love Caleb's opinion over yours because he is much more calm and humble in his opinion.
I got a room full of hammers that just in case.
I like it. Oh yeah.
So
Nothing wrong with
one
that.
of the things that,
What do you
that
think
Caleb
this is
pointed
for?
to though was these pendulum swings back and forth, right? Historically, and historically, one thing I think we often forget is those big pendulum swings also often came with millions upon millions of deaths.
Yes.
And,
I agree.
And,
Tragically, yes.
and my concern that the trajectory that we're on and that the trajectory that our leaders have put us on
yes.
is not a good one. I don't know if anyone looked this week, but we have Russian warships with super hypersonic warheads.
Is that even a real word? Super
Hyper-
hypersonic?
It's hypersonic
No, you said
warheads.
super hypersonic.
I know. I threw an extra
Yeah.
adjective
That's
in
why I
there.
love you, brother.
Emphasize that they are super.
But-
Super hypersonic.
Like if they decide
Hit the
to
button?
launch to hit buttons, like there's nothing you can do. Like they will be here in literally. I mean they're less than 90 miles away.
Yeah, super hypersonic
Super
speed.
hypersonic speed, and it's faster than sonic, which is faster than sound.
Sonic's.
But
Sonic's cool. Blue hedgehog.
I have a hard time, and I hope everybody's right when it comes to if you have a very optimistic view on this. But I also see the trajectory that we have in America, where we talk about this very hopeful pendulum swing back to something, and I think you're right, and I think there will be a pendulum swing.
But
But I
Caleb
think
also pointed out it took severe unrest and
100%.
and all that for these pendulum swings.
because
yeah.
I think we now for the very first time in America, and I think this was even different going back to the Civil War. We have essentially 50% of the country, or let's do it like this: 40% of the country on one side, 40% of the country on the other side, that have completely irreconcilable belief systems.
And then 40% that doesn't have an opinion.
And then there's 10% on either side that can be swayed or doesn't have an opinion or thinks slightly
I'm
different.
not good at math.
And
we are at extremes, that's for sure.
I like.
You think it's that extreme on either side?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I really do.
I would agree that it is.
Really?
Because the boundaries of that extreme have been pushed so far. You know what I mean?
So it's forced them into those extremes to just as a shield almost.
Exactly. I mean, when one side that used to be over here goes so far in that direction, then even the people that were here, even if they are more towards that middle, seem like they're extreme and are being painted as extreme for even believing the middle anymore.
Well, I mean, you look
others-
at people that have always been, considered very traditional liberals, whether it's Bill Maher, whether you're talking about Joe Rogan. Now some of these people are painting these people as far right, which is absolutely crazy.
No, I see what you're saying then.
Extreme compared to what's happening.
Like if you call out nonsense, and I think this is also very exclusive to the left, because one of the problems that we've always had on the right is that we do a lot of infighting because we will call to task people within our own party, within our own belief system. That's a traditional Christian, Judeo-Christian belief system. That's how we grew up. That's how we think. Whereas you have this one party that, man, once there's a talking point out, they stick with it no matter what. And even going back to what you're talking about, yes, the internet allowed these very extreme, very loud minorities to have so much more influence and to allow them to coalesce more and more, and then have, almost shockingly influence the rest of kind of their side of the spectrum, to where, things, it's crazy when we look at, things that were not considered extreme today, even on the left, whether it's talk about like, most people going back 10 years, five years ago, if you said, hey, you know what? I think abortion should be legal up to the day of birth. That'd be like, oh man, that's a little bit crazy. Now it's like, nope, that is the policy.
Yeah.
I don't
Put it like it's
yeah.
law or
And I can see this going to where it's like, 1 month post birth. They don't really know what's going on.
It's funny because this type of thing is the guy who wrote Gulliver's Travels. He wrote it. I can't remember his name. He wrote an essay back in the day when there was a deal with the Irish and the English, and the English were getting tired of all the Irish dissidents and all the Irish, the famine and all that stuff happened. And he wrote an essay, said, well, why don't we just start off in the little ones and eating them? Solves two problems. And his viewpoint, he put it out there as a smart aleck comment, but he made it so extreme to show them the extremity of their own belief, because they believed that the Irish were subhuman, and they believed the aristocracy and stuff. They were the Irish were subhuman. We shouldn't treat them with any compassion, and we should just get rid of them. And he's like, you're right. Everybody's hungry. Why don't we just start killing the ones that are 2 years old or younger? We off the population, and we got food, no problem.
And they are more tender.
Yeah, and they are more tender. And it took, they can't fight.
Speak for yourself.
But it took that extreme confrontation with the extremity of their viewpoints.
Yeah.
Being made public to back them down, to make them realize, like, oh, wait a second, crap, we're kind of getting off the rocker here. And I feel like most people that are not on the extreme far end of things, now that they're finally starting to realize the extremity that the other side is willing to go, and what's becoming normalized in its extremity and its depravity is so far beyond what they ever would have thought themselves believing. I feel like a lot of them are starting to come back to their senses, like you say, the middle of the line liberals and stuff like Joe Rogan and stuff, saying like, whoa, come, hold on a second, y'all are going a little far with this,
Yeah, no, and I think we definitely see some good common sense liberals or Democrats that are experiencing that. And I think COVID and everything that happened during COVID was a big eye opener for everybody. Yeah. I do think the political and social extremes that we're taking, especially when it comes to, the transgender and pushing these different therapies and or surgeries on kids, I think that was one of the things that people were like, wait a second. Yeah. Like, I'm on board until we start lopping off body parts of 9-year-olds or putting them on hormone blockers or whatever else. And I think that we started seeing, once that started happening, I think people were like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, it is an extreme thing. Like, you won't even let these kids get tattoos.
No.
They're making that type of decision that age, and nobody needs to be making it for them either. Yeah. They're pushing it on them. I mean, that's just a whole new level of psychotherapy that needs to happen with the parents pushing it on the kids. It's like, don't push your depravity on young, impressionable minds, as consenting adults living their lives in the way that they choose and doing to themselves what they choose. Go for it, whatever, do your thing.
Yeah. When you have, these top liberals and that's it's not even fair to call them that, but when you have these political folks that have, two kids that are both, transgender, pansexual, and they're both 8 years old, like,
come on.
There's, first of all, the odds of that are 1 in probably trillions. Secondly, they've clearly have influenced their kids into just pure insanity.
God, yeah. They're impressionable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, and I know you've probably experienced this overseas with extremism in the religions and stuff like that, or the religion of Islam, extremist Islam. They talk a lot of kids into doing really harmful things to themselves, to take out targets and kill, like, bombing themselves, like blowing themselves up, because they're impressionable. They're dumb enough to do it. They're stupid enough to talk into the stupidest things. Yeah. And that's,
you can do that with a normal kid.
Exactly. And
you jump off that, he ain't gonna be hurt that bad. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's the problem. Is it you have adults using.
Which is the exact reason that we have ages of consent to begin with. That's exactly why
Smoke, drink, drive, everything.
That's 9 yards. Yeah.
relationships with other people, that's the entire reason, and that's part of the problem, is that we have completely jettisoned all common sense, and every day I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, watching what some people accept to be fact and what policies some people are pushing. But again, this goes back to what I'm saying. Like, I'm not as optimistic when it comes to this pendulum swing, and the pendulum swing is going to happen.
You make me depressed every time we talk about it.
I know. But even when we look at America, if we get President Trump and he got everybody in there they wanted, we completely overhauled Congress. We had Republicans.
But you only got 4 years.
Well, besides that, even if they were able to completely make a 180 when it comes to our economic policy, our social policies, everything, I don't know that. I think it's already too late. Like, we are in such debt. We have lost. What's that?
Too late for what?
Too late to not end up in a completely deconstructed America.
Okay.
Between the fact that we make nothing here anymore, we have
completely unself-sufficient.
Like, let's say suddenly we couldn't get steel from China. Like, it would take years before we could get a steel mill up and running and do anything.
Or just
all these things.
Blow the dust out of Pittsburgh.
We are
and get
so
it rolling.
reliant on.
And
We're so reliant on the world.
35 trillion in debt now?
Something like that. Who knows? It's probably 50 trillion. It really doesn't matter at this
I
point.
think it's 35.
But
How much M390 do you have?
we'll talk about that after the show.
For long.
You were trying to buy some?
I think I got one blank left.
He's like, road
trying
trip
to buy
to West
some?
Virginia.
Everybody out there needs to invest in high carbon and some forging equipment. That's all I'm going to say. Because
Guns, ammo,
And forging equipment.
Yeah.
I like that.
anything that'll help you stay alive for a long period of time, and have some medical.
Harvest Right freeze dryer. You can start doing your
Harvest
food
Right
preps
freeze
now.
dryers. We just became a dealer for those. That's why she's throwing that in there, Caleb. They are freaking sweet, though.
Build yourself a root cellar too.
Yeah.
The old ways are going to have to
Store
come back.
some seeds. Store some seeds.
34.62 trillion as of today.
Oh boy.
It's supposed to be 35.5 trillion by the election.
Write a check.
Hey, if you started with that as a knife maker, you'd be a billionaire by the end of the year.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not a bad.
100%.
It's not a bad deal.
That's what they say in the gun industry too. If you want to end up with a small fortune, start out with a large one.
Pretty much.
It is true. Well, let's talk about that. Like, so when we're talking about the economy and things like that, Caleb, as small business, we know the struggles. I know kind of the knife industry is a little niche. What have you seen as far as the economy lately? Costs going up. What are some challenges that you, as a small business owner making knives, face on a daily basis?
On average, the costs have gone up about 30 to 40% across the board for everything.
Wow.
Steel being the worst of them. And in some cases, it's, that extreme exactly. And then just in general, overall, energy costs are up, just running the shop and stuff like that. I will say that I have talked to so many people in the last few months that this last year or two, even guys that were doing really, really well, this last year or two they've taken major hits. Just because people are holding on to their money. They're scared. They don't know what's going to happen. They're being wiser and more frugal, and that's great, and it is great to do that. I would highly encourage people to do that. Be frugal, set your money self back some resources and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, in a lot of instances, handmade knives are luxury goods. They're crucial, and they can be crucial working tools and crucial tools to life in general.
At the end of the day, it does require some disposable income.
Yeah, it does. It's, for a handcrafted product, it requires disposable income, and I am not the only one who's seen a big hit in the last few years. This last year, personally, our biggest hit was we uprooted the shop. I was out of work for basically 9 months, and that was a big upset to the momentum I had going in the business. But it had started to trickle out even before that, and people I've noticed over the last couple of years are just kind of holding on a little tighter to what they have. Now, you're always going to have your collectors. You're always going to have your people with more disposable income or prioritizing their income. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
people prioritize their income. Like I personally do. Like I prioritize income with food, food preparation, that kind of stuff, and guns and ammo. And I've got lots of good knives laying around, so I'm all set there. But when you have your basics prioritized and you have a little extra, yeah, people are still going to spend and enjoy life and hope that things just continue as normal. But yeah, there's been quite a few makers I've talked to lately. They've taken some hits, and there's more than one person I can think of, maybe a handful that were full time that are no longer. They can't do it anymore, and they've had to go seek alternate employment. And I personally was in that position not long ago, thinking about, like, all right, do we keep trying, or do we try to open the doors again and get this thing back off the ground, or do we pivot for a little while and that's fine, and just go do something else and see what happens. But we're fortunate, my wife and I, and that she's had a stable job, and we're in a better position now here than we were where we were living before, and we've gotten ourselves in a much better financial position, so we can just keep plugging along and keep making knives. And the markets are, after this weekend, it looks like the markets are still responding well to what I'm making, and people still want it and still like it, and I'm digging that. I mean, the craft lives and breathes on our collectors and customers. It really does. I mean, I can make knives all day long. I'm just a weird dude hanging out in the basement making cool stuff, and has a pile of them in the corner. I give them away at Christmas. That's one thing.
Right.
If you want to make a living at it, your customers and collectors have to be there, and they have to see the value in what you do, and they have to want it, and want it enough to do what it takes to get it. And you have to make the quality worth it. Product and quality worth it that they want. So, it's interesting. It's an interesting craft, and it's interesting to see where it's going to go this year. You know what I mean? Because as we get closer to election season, as we get closer to, new unfriendly neighbors down in the Gulf and everything like that, hanging out with warships and all that, I don't know. It could get real interesting around here real stinking quick.
And just in a blink of an eye,
Yeah.
it could get pretty nuts quick. No,
Yeah.
so what do you think? What do you think is, well, considering where you're at right now and where you, I imagine, have a goal to be? What do you think is your biggest challenge on that?
I think efficiency in the shop. Efficiency, because I've got a pretty good idea of what I want to make, ironed out after all these years, and what I like making, what my customers like from me, because I make some things and people are just like, meh, they're looking for something different in that category, like titanium frame locks, folding knives. I like them when they're done. I don't enjoy making them, and I cannot make them quickly. You know what I mean? And they're not going to be as...
People, I don't think anyone, unless you try to do it, have any idea the complexity of hand making a quality folding knife. It is no joke, folks.
Yeah, especially in titanium. And I don't have a CNC. I don't run that kind of stuff. It's handmade with a little mini mill is what I do my milling machine operations with, all by hand. And so I can't make them as quick or efficient as some of these guys out there that are running higher grade equipment or maybe doing mid-tech type of stuff. And they've become a fad where, it's just like a toy that everybody wants to play with. And if it doesn't meet these certain specifications of butt bearings and flipping and all this stuff, then people kind of wash past it. So I can't make them as fast or as efficient as other people. So I don't promise anybody I'm going to make them much. I just make them as I'm making them and the way I feel like making them. People have responded well to them. The people that have bought them have loved them. It's just, I can't keep up with that particular niche. And personally, I like, fixed blades more, and just that kind of combat fighter knife genre. And so I feel like I'm going to press more into that in the next year or two and try to just make those processes more efficient in the shop. Like you said, maybe even get a leather sewing machine this year. Who knows? I might go wild and get
Sweet. Save the thumbs.
Nuts.
Yeah, save the thumbs and save the time. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Let them stack up 10 knives at a time. And then I'm sitting there like, oh, why did I do that? So
That was my mistake. Is I started taking pre-orders
No, he's
for
saying
knives.
for sewing the
No,
sheaths.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying
Yeah.
where I
You
started
had pre-orders and had them build
he
up.
talked, he said, hey, I'm making knives, but yeah, I started making, taking pre-orders, and it's like, man, once you got somebody's money, they feel like they own you.
Yeah.
And it's like, where's my knife? Hey, I was like, hey, man, because that's the thing that people don't realize. Like, hey, if suddenly, you're sick for a month,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how it is. It's the little things like
Yep.
something happens with the kids or the wife's sick. Start stacking days
Does.
of things that happen that only you can do. It's not like you can call somebody else up or
Yeah.
tell one of your employees to handle it. You're the guy,
Yeah.
and it gets. I wish it's a double-edged sword. Not pun
No
not-
pun intended.
No pun intended there. But I'm glad. I ended up where I'm at. So I think that if I hadn't started taking those orders and it becoming work, because that's what happened. It became stressful work that I didn't want to do anymore, and just sold one knife at a time when I'm done with it. Because again, I also had a full-time job. A lot of that time I was also working through deployments.
Yeah.
I was taking knife orders like, hey, I'm on a deployment. I'm not even sure when I'll get back, to be honest with you. Like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then 3 months later, where's my knife? Well, when I
still
took
on
your money,
deployment.
when I took your money, you
Yeah.
said it wasn't a big deal. You weren't in a hurry, but now you are. But
I don't take money anymore. I do not take money. I'm going to listen. I will let you know when it's done.
there you go.
'Cause
There you go.
You get into too much trouble with that, and there's too much pressure. And I did that in the early days, thinking I needed to take deposits on everything to kind of solidify the sale. But honestly, I've only had a few people ghost me, and I can turn around and sell that sucker to someone else.
100%.
Oh, absolutely.
No, you ghost me, that's where your knife's going to be sold by the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
If we're within the time frame, that we talked about,
Yeah.
But
Sure.
don't
Well,
take
and that was the other part of it too. Once you take an order for a knife, a specific color of this, specific blade type, again, that's also becoming work. It's like, you know what? This is the knife that I wanted to make this time. I wanted to make something else. And when you can just make what you want to make, and have that freedom to do that,
Yes.
definitely the way to go. Definitely the way to go.
That's one thing I'm working towards this year is really kind of streamlining that aspect of custom versus handmade. I don't offer full customs anymore. Like, you cannot design a knife and I'll make it for you. That's never going to happen again.
Good.
Not my catalog, and if it's not my design, I will not make it.
Yeah.
It's not something I offer in my catalog. If it's like an older knife that I made special or an art piece, I ain't making it for you. I will make you something similar. That's great, but it's going to be my style, my design, my way. And just streamlining that catalog to where people have a narrow corridor of what they can get from you really makes my job easier, as so far as just meeting that demand, meeting my customers
And meeting those expectations. They see it on your website. Hey, this is available. This is the knife. I order it. I'm going to get it in the next couple of days. It makes you happy. You got to make the knife that you wanted, and everybody's much happier.
And as I tweak designs or improve things, I always update that. And like, hey, all right, look, I want to try something new in this process or this finishing aspect of them. Do you mind if I give it a whirl on your knife? And most people have been really receptive to that. I do have people still occasionally request, hey, can you do this type of steel with this type of finish and this type of blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I won't. I will turn orders down for that. Like, I'm sorry. This is not Burger King.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
You can't have it your way.
You do not rule.
Well,
you can have it any way you want it, so long as it's Caleb White. You know
and
what
the
I mean?
comparison may be a stretch, but it's not like people went to Van Gogh and was like, "Hey, I want you to paint this picture and this picture, and this is what I want in the picture." Like,
I'm gonna start answering the phone like that. This is not Burger King.
Caleb, how do you get the details in the handles of these daggers? Dude, that is insane.
He's not telling you his.
You don't have to tell me, but
File
that is insane.
file
file work.
Is that all file on the wood?
file, copy, insanity, and sandpaper. That's it.
Dude, those
It's file,
things.
sandpaper, and a whole lot of cussing. I love doing it though. Actually, when I get to carve, like when I do
Wow.
knives and more artistic things like that, where I'm just choosing, like, I want to do this, and I want to do it how I do it. I actually really find that enjoyable.
Say the Black Queen on your website. Holy crap!
That's an old one too. That one's like 12 years old.
Is it that
I don't even
thing?
know where that is anymore. I haven't done it.
Well, it's for sale, so maybe I'll click on it.
Who's selling it?
No, I don't think it's for sale. It's a picture I think you have in your
He's
file.
It's on your
joking.
website.
He's
Yeah.
joking.
Oh my gosh! I hope it ain't for sale on my website, because I don't have that thing in over a decade.
No, I'm just looking at it. Was in your dagger
It
section.
says
It
buy
just-
now for $3.99.
Yeah, $3.99, $10 shipping.
eBay special.
But no, I was looking at your daggers in one of your drop boxes or in your menu, and the handlework is incredible. It's
Those-
perfect.
Those are one of the things I do not take orders on is daggers.
Man, they look good, dude.
I don't take specific orders. I will take somebody saying, "Hey, I would like one of your daggers," and I will say, "Hey, cool, I'll put you on my list." And do one whenever that is. It could be a decade from now. I'll call you,
Right.
if you want it, because they are painstakingly time consuming. I'm not fast at them at all. There's some guys out there I know they can bang them out quick. I am not one of those people.
Well, I can see your artistic graphic background on choosing what material to use for the handguard. Because like on the Black Queen, it looks like you used a piece of bronze or copper. I can't tell
Bronze.
because a piece of bronze. But then you go up to this other one on I don't know how do you say it, the Kaiju Tanto. It looks like it's a piece of stainless, and it just whatever fits that knife. I can see your artistic mind working. What's gonna be the most or make this set apart from the rest of the world, essentially. And it takes an artistic person. You can't just take a me who
It actually
is
takes an autistic person.
autistic. Well, you can't. It doesn't. I'm a what do you call it? Like a concrete guy who you give me a set of plans, I can build it and make it for you. I don't have the artistic ability where like my brother, he could draw it and then hand it to me. I'll be like, all right, I can build that. But I can't take that artistic ability in the beginning because you see these knives in your head before you ever start.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is where I'm getting to. Here's where I'm starting. But you can make that A to B connection. I need the person in the center with A.2 saying, all right, here's your directions, how to get there. Then I can finish it.
You would think that that's the way it works, but I'm going to be honest with you. It rarely works that way.
Don't give away your secrets.
See, look, okay. I start with a design. Like I draw everything out. Every knife I've ever made has a drawing somewhere, right? And I go through maybe a couple versions of it. And then when I start making that sucker and the material starts being a punk and I have to shift gears into something else, the design changes.
Or the grinder slips when you
And then I cuss and throw the thing across the bridge.
They're like, yeah, this little design feature you put in there, that was genius.
Like
I was
this,
like, oh, yeah, I know.
This
right.
drawing, what drawing?
Really, what happened was,
There's a lot of turns on that road. I try to end up where I started, but like this guy right here, I started the knife. I don't know. I designed it 3 years ago, and I started the knife twice, and I've thrown it away twice already. And it's like that's just some of the fittings and the handles and stuff like that is where I get bogged down big time because I don't have a lathe or anything like that. So turning and making some of the fittings and stuff, and I didn't have a lot of skill back in those days, so I was just kind of going off of what I had. But when I get into the carving, that's when it's like, oh, I speak this language. I've been drawing since I was old enough to crawl. So the carving to me is just like drawing in material.
I can tell it shows.
And I can speak that language, and I like that graphic kind of geometrical style of things. And even whether I'm doing it symmetrical or asymmetrical, I like that. I like that just freestyle. Like going with a plan, going with an overall form language, like this type of dagger. I'm going in with I have the form language I want to make in the drawing here, but the details within that form will shift as I move along. And sometimes the material does kind of determine that direction. Like if I get into the stainless bronze or whatever I'm working with and it's not behaving the way I want it to or shaping out the way I want it to or catching light the way I want it to, then I'll shift it. I'll maybe change the angles here or change the, whatever there. There's a lot of freedom in that too, though, That's why I don't take orders for them because I would
100%.
mad.
You have an incredible talent, dude. I mean,
I appreciate it.
there's
As long as I can do it, I'll do it. You know what I mean?
as a matter of fact,
Well, I was
folks,
looking at your pipes too. I was just like, oh, well, now he's speaking my language too. I see those on
anybody
the
out
website.
there, look, if you're looking for a great Christmas present, if you're looking for a great birthday present or whatever else,
Or send me one.
get on there and order any knives that Caleb has. I think you're investing in this art form, you're investing in him, his family, and you're investing in the future. We're talking about these items that are heirloom items, right? Think about the fact that 100 years ago, handmade knives were as ubiquitous as this pen.
Yep, 100%.
But most of those are gone. Like you can't. It's very rare to find 100-year-old handmade knife, 100-year-old handmade anything.
Yeah.
And those things, everything was pretty much handmade back then. I don't care if you're talking about axe, a sledgehammer, like
Furniture.
people threw that stuff away. And so, having something like that is harder and harder to find, and definitely going into the future, it's going to be harder to find. So I think, anything that people can invest in that is, being made by a skilled person, I think, it just makes sense. And it's something that you're going to enjoy and you're going to be able to pass down.
I just want to let everybody know, if they want to get me a Christmas present, I'm giving you a big heads up. I would take the tanker buoy off of Caleb's website. That when that thing is
which one?
wink.
Ironwood handle one.
Oh my God, that thing's beautiful.
I'm gonna put you up a GoFundMe tonight.
Holy crap,
Well,
bro.
if Robin's watching, there you go, Robin.
Here's the story on that one.
I like it. It's got a big handguard too. That's key for me. I like to have the big handguard.
All right, here's the story on that one. That was last minute blade for Blade Show because I messed up on the other knives that I was getting ready for the show. And I'd done that tanker buoy as a utility. I had actually a utility version of it on the website, just full tang with the stainless guard, OD green handle, nice. And somebody got that one right off the bat. But that guy, I cut another one out because I messed up this knife that I was going to try to get on the table, which is my Modern Combat Model 1. And I dorked up the finish on it, and I hit it with a hammer, and it brute to forge, we'll call it that. But that doesn't work in stainless. And so I jacked it up, and so I was like rushing last minute. I was like, what can I do that I can actually get done before then? And I'd already started cutting out another tanker buoy for when I got back. So I chopped the tang off of that sucker, then pulled it down to a hidden tang, and started working that bronze guard on there. And then I started polishing that sucker just to give it a pre-polish, because I usually pre-polish before I sat and finish them. It helps make sure everything's clean. But the polish was just coming out so sweet. I'm like, oh, the guard fit great. It's bronze. The polish came out immaculate. I'm like, what am I going to do with
I
this
like the bronze guards.
Well, I pulled out
thing.
the ironwood that I've had sitting around for like years, because I break ironwood and high-end materials like that almost every time I use them. These are like indestructible woods. So I pulled it out. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to try to see how this goes. I'm not even going to. If it works out, it works out great. If not, I've got another one for my stash, and it just all came together like at the last minute. Like
I say, that thing is beautiful.
Oh gosh, yeah, that one worked out pretty darn good.
I'd say for a scrap piece move going to that, oh my God.
Yeah, it was the sheath on that one. Actually, it's got some pretty good time into the sheath too, so it's really nice.
As Bob Ross says, that's a happy little mistake.
That's right. You know what? And you again, there's a grinder right over there. We can get you. You can make your. I will say, getting hooked on drugs is cheaper and easier.
Yeah,
I guarantee it.
The recovery is easier. I've never knife making, not ever.
You have,
dude. That is a piece.
They still have the grinder and all their steel.
That's right.
That is a good looking knife, brother.
Well, listen. Anybody out there got any last questions, comments for Caleb out there? If you do, throw those up now. But
again, that's Chris at Paramount Tactical, the tanker buoy for Christmas.
The tanker buoy ironwood version.
The ironwood version.
Yeah.
funny.
Chris at Paramount Tactical.
And just FYI, it is CalebWhiteKnives.com.
And if
It's
you go
easy.
down in the
It's easy.
description, we got his website linked. Get on there, support Caleb, support what he does.
I do have
think
a few left from the Blade Show batch, so they are on the website ready to go.
awesome.
They're ready to ship. Hey, there could be some last minute Father's Day gifts.
That's
Absolutely,
true. And that will
folks.
be the last of the batch for a little while, because I've got to get into the summer batch this next week. So
Oh.
I got some orders, so that's going to be the last of them for a few.
There you go, folks.
Again, I need a Father's Day present.
Yeah, right. It's coming.
Robin.
No, I already asked her for something for me.
Oh.
You know what, Chris?
I
You're
need-
such a great father and a husband. You deserve more than one thing.
Wow.
And
I
I
just
think-
asked her to tip the
I
set
think-
aside.
Wait till you see Gary's
I
Father's Day
think-
present.
Oh, you getting a haircut?
She's trying to force me in a barber chair. I'm pretty sure
you
that
get- are you
her
get-
and John Walsh are colluding together because he keeps bringing it up too
What? Oh, the haircut?
about haircut. He's like, "What's wrong with your hair?"
At least it ain't gray. Mine's gray.
But no, listen, Caleb, we really enjoyed getting to know you, get to
awesome
talk to you
show.
tonight. We're going to have you on again in the future for sure. But if there's anything that we can do to support you, again, he has a YouTube channel as well. He actually does a lot of cool gun stuff as well. He talks about pipe smoking, tobacco. He's a Renaissance man. So get down there, support him, go check out his content, and we will definitely have him on again. And hopefully we'll get you out here to West Virginia sometime and come do some shooting with us and hanging out.
Let's do it. You got a range? I'll come.
We sure do. We
Oh,
gotta,
yeah. We
When are we
got
doing
ranges.
this? How long's the range?
Depends on where you want to go.
Well, where we do our long range schools, we got out to about 1250, and probably push it a
All
little
in.
bit further. Yeah, we got a whole training complex where we have 300-yard range, 100-yard range, CQB ranges. Yeah, trust
See,
me, we
that's
got you
the
covered.
podcast we need to do because we haven't even talked about the 6 arc or anything yet.
Well, we can talk about 6 arc. We can talk about
man.
6
6
max.
max.
I got a
Yes.
6 max back there.
You just bought some stuff for that?
I'm a big fan of the 6 max. I'll be
Oh,
honest
I
with you.
just
I
got
could-
in like several
get
more
on board.
6 max uppers if anybody's just looking for an upper.
I
Yeah.
could get on board with the 6 Mac pretty quick.
Yeah.
If
I
they
think-
hadn't come out with the arcs, I'd already be on board with the Max.
I think, yeah. I look, the 6 arc is great, and I think that, I mean, there's some improvements in my mind with the 6 max, mainly to do that bolt face.
Yeah.
There's some interesting things there, but I think relatively speaking, performance wise, they're very, very damn close. So I think you're going to go. You can't go wrong with either one of them. It's a freaking 1,000-yard gun that you can get extremely accurate in a small frame AR. It's like a sore Peter. You can't beat it.
Oh,
So.
Jesus.
You bet, man. That's the way.
I
Yep.
mean,
But yeah, no, we'll get you out here. We'll do some shooting, have some fun, and yeah, it'll be a good time.
All right, man. Good.
Yeah. All right.
some
So
bourbon.
you hang tight, but for everybody else out there, folks, again, go down there, subscribe to our newsletter, come train with us, go watch our YouTube content,
buy me that knife.
come see us every Wednesday here live.
Help Caleb out.
Yeah, help Caleb out,
Buy me
buy
that
Chris
one.
a knife,
I'd love it.
By summer and
buy Summer a knife.
Summer needs
That'll
one. Summer,
end
I
up
got-
in my back. What was that, Caleb?
I got something that worked really well for summer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, one or two. I got some nice ones on there for the ladies too. You know,
Sweet.
nice.
Yep, go check those out, folks. But anyways, we really appreciate you guys coming out tonight for our Lost Boys over on Rumble. I'll go back through there and see your comments because we can't see them here. But
Otter was there.
we appreciate everybody's support. And until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.